Hello, podcast friends. I believe there would be a major positive shift on this planet if my country, the United States, were to adopt a feminist foreign policy. I tweeted that sentiment after interviewing my current guest, Kristina Lunz. I was a little nervous. I don't know exactly why. Speaking your truth is always a little scary, especially for us women. But I got a lot of likes on Twitter from men and women alike, so it was pretty interesting. What is a feminist foreign policy? I will let Kristina Lunz mostly answer that because she's so good at it. But I will say that at the outset, like this podcast does, it's processes and leadership that build common ground rather than dividing and polarizing people. It emphasizes more of the win-win, less win-lose processes for resolving differences. Frankly, the egocentric, I want it now and it's your fault that I can't get it, the blame game is wearing super thin on me. Drumming up conflict and zero-sum thinking, attacking people to get your needs and interests met as a style is, well, not just developmentally juvenile, but just plain dangerous. It creates one homogeneous world with probably mostly white, straight men on top, with the rest of us supporting them and dependent on them for handouts and our survival. Yuck, sorry, not interested. And I know so many women and men who also are not interested. This podcast advocated empowering women, not just because it's an end in itself, which it is, but because it's the most powerful way to get to a more peaceful and sustainable planet for all of us. You get real democracy when you have real democracy starting in the home, and better sex too, by the way. I hope you've noticed that what the countries with the best coronavirus responses have in common is that they are run by women. Not because there aren't many great men leaders out there, but because these women are probably more effortlessly bringing to the table the quality of collaboration, which is so sorely needed on the planet right now. Hopefully this pandemic is underscoring deeply our interdependence and need for collaboration. As Kurt Lewin, grandfather of social psychology, said long ago, everyone understands authority, but democracy is a learned behavior. So the Center for Feminist Foreign Policy was co-founded by my current guest, Kristina Lunz. It's an international research and advocacy organization and was established in 2016. It's dedicated to promoting feminist foreign policy across the globe. The problem, as they say, is just outdated patriarchal structures that are well past their expiration date. That's my language. And their vision is to create an intersectional approach to foreign policy globally. Research shows, Kristina tells me, that the most significant factor toward whether a country is peaceful within its own borders or towards other countries is the level of gender equality. So, as she says, if that's true, it's pretty easy. It just means that there won't be any peace without feminism. Kristina is an award-winning human rights activist, co-founder and Germany director of the Center for Feminist Foreign Policy and advisor to the German Federal Foreign Office. She was also recently named on the Forbes 30 Under 30 list. She graduated with distinction from University College London School of Public Policy and did a second master's at the Oxford Department of International Development in Diplomacy. During her time in Oxford, she started getting involved in activism and has been campaigning since. Her bio, as always, will be posted on the podcast blog at susancoleman.global. I've learned so much from doing this episode and talking to Kristina. A few of the many things that stand out. I spent years going to The Hague to work with ICTY, the International Court for the former Yugoslavia, a part of the UN, but wasn't aware until now that 100 years ago in The Hague, during the First World War, about 1,500 women from all over the place came together for the International Congress for Women to demand an end to the First World War and establish a set of resolutions to avoid another world war, which included, for example, the dismantling of the industrial military complex, the prioritization of mediation for conflict resolution, and the democratization of foreign policy. Super interesting. History is always so interesting. I found it really moving that Sweden has taken a stand and describes itself as having a feminist government and created a feminist foreign policy in 2014, which was followed by Canada, followed by Mexico. Check out the Center for Feminist Foreign Policy's website to see the history of feminist foreign policy. It just shows what's possible. I found it interesting to hear about Emma Watson's conversation with Valerie Hudson and the latter's new book coming out called The First Political Order, How Sex Shapes Governance and National Security Worldwide, which sounds like a really important contribution. And I hope to get her on the podcast soon to talk about it. Hope she'll agree. As a result of talking to Kristina, I enjoyed reading the interview that she mentioned between Emma Watson, the actress, and Valerie Hudson, where one of the things that Emma has claimed is because she's single is self-partnering. And while I certainly have enjoyed my journey of the last 10 years living without a partner, though I've dated some wonderful guys, the idea of self-partnering somehow really struck me as like really empowering, because I think still in our world order, living without the protection of a guy can still feel frightening to so many of women, myself included. So I'll stop there and let you listen to Kristina Lunz, a woman who is really on fire and is going to do a lot to contribute to our common great future. Kristina, it is such a pleasure to find you, really. I mean, it's so funny to me in the world how we can be in this on this planet together, so many interesting people doing things that are related and not run into each other for a while. And then when I ran into you, I went, oh my gosh, I can't believe I found, this woman is doing amazing, amazing work. So thank you so much for joining us on the Peace Building Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Susan.
So, you have founded something called, and let me make sure I have the name right, the Center for Feminist Foreign Policy. Mm-hmm. And you are based, where am I finding you right now?
Well, right now, during this pandemic, I'm in the Bavarian countryside in Germany, but normally I'm based in Berlin.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I know all of us are in our homes. And how has this been going for you, this craziness that we are all living with?
I mean, I personally, I'm really well off, and I'm very privileged, like, to have my family here in the countryside, so that I could kind of escape Berlin and do my bit about staying inside, not running into other people, to kind of flatten the curve. So I'm personally really well. In my work, we're lots concerned about what this current crisis means to different aspects. But yeah, I'm well.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I find when I thought about it, I thought, well, what's the best I can do? And I thought, well, the best I can do probably is stay out of the hospital system and stay out of people's way, and do the best possible work I can about what I'm doing, because it is related. It's not immediately related to the crisis, but it's certainly related in the big term to the crisis. So why don't we launch right in, and you tell me something that I'm sure you answer all the time. What is a feminist foreign policy? How would you describe that?
So feminist foreign policy for us, it's like a tool to analyze power. Like, it goes back to the concept of social power. So like, who gets to set the agenda, whose lived experiences and needs are taken into consideration, and who's making decisions. So for us, for my organization, Feminist Foreign Policy means that kind of in a first step, we acknowledge that inequalities, and gender inequality is one of them, exist globally. And in a second step, we demand that all tools of foreign and security policy are used to eradicate those inequalities, because we know, because research shows that the most significant factor towards whether a country is peaceful within its own borders or towards other countries is the level of gender equality. So it's pretty easy. It just means that there won't be any peace without feminism.
Let me just highlight what you just said, because on this podcast, we've been saying pretty consistently that the most impactful peace building initiative that could be undertaken is to get, sometimes I say get gender right, but gender equality. Really, when you look at the relationship between what happens in the home and workplaces in the world, if you get gender right, suddenly you have a very different world. And I think that's what you just said, if I heard you right.
Exactly that. And it wasn't only this week that that Emma Watson published this interview she did with Valerie Hudson, and her work, like the professor from Texas. Her work has been really instrumental and important for our work because, like, she's done lots of research on the link between what's happening in the home and the power relations in the home, and like kind of this first political order, what she calls, and how this translates to relationships within a country, but also interstate relationships. So exactly what you said. Yeah.
Yeah. What's her name again?
Valerie Hudson.
Okay.
Highly recommend
Beautiful. Her. I have to say personally, I almost, I did start to cry when I was looking over your website is so great. It's got so many wonderful things on there. But I was looking at the history of feminist foreign policy, and that was really moving to me. And particularly because I have some very close Swedish friends, and we're all often talking about, one of them is very close to me. Any of the ways I grew up in a very patriarchal family, where, I grew right in the heart of Wall Street, surrounded by all of it, and also around the Vietnam War, and my undergraduate degree was, basically in imperialism. I didn't call it that, but that was basically it. But, when I was looking at the history of feminist foreign policy, I was so moved by just that Sweden, I guess, was at the ground floor of this. It says something like equality between women and men is a fundamental aim of Swedish foreign policy. Ensuring that women and girls can enjoy their fundamental human rights is both an obligation within the framework of our international commitments and a prerequisite for reaching Sweden's broader foreign policy goals on peace and security and sustainable development. I don't know. I mean, I just think, because I think, and I'm interested in your view on this, maybe because I'm a U.S. citizen, I feel like it's part of what motivates me to do what I do is that I have been right at the heart of, I think, right at the heart of the beast. But I'm a woman, and that affected me really differently. I was a second-class citizen. I was there to serve, not to be the one who's going to be the dominator. And I feel like my country really has been, in terms of, I guess I would say that if my country were to engage in a feminist foreign policy, that would be quite a shift on the planet.
Right. That would be quite something.
Right. So what are your thoughts about that? What are your thoughts about?
I mean, I can maybe that's interesting to some of the listeners, like a little overview of the history of feminist.
I would love to hear that. I think it's very interesting. And it was news to me, and I've been trying to pay attention. Maybe that's my bad, but it was still news to me. So yeah, I'd love to hear about it.
So yeah, you mentioned Sweden. So in 2014, indeed, after Sweden had already called itself a feminist government, in 2014, they also introduced a feminist foreign policy. And whilst Sweden and Margot Wallström, the then foreign minister, she all credit is to her, definitely, because they're the first country that officially announced the feminist foreign policy. But also, I think it's important to acknowledge in that regard the incredible work of feminist organizations that had been done decades before Sweden announced their feminist foreign policy. So it was 100 years ago that in The Hague during the First World War, 1,500 feminists from all over the place, countries came together in The Hague for the International Congress of Women to demand an end to the First World War, and published a set of resolutions to avoid another world war. And they included, for example, the dismantling of the industrial military complex, and the prioritization of mediation for conflict resolution, and the democratization of foreign policy, and many more. So feminist civil society organizations, they have been doing incredible work, and based on all this research and knowledge. And then in the 80s, feminist international relations theory became more prominent. like based on all of this, in 2014, Margot Wallström, as feminist and vocal as she had been for many years, she announced Sweden's first, the world's first feminist foreign policy in Sweden. And then very shortly after, well, in the beginning, and when you read interviews,
first of all, how was that received?
Yeah. Good question. Like when it's funny, like when you listen to her when she speaks about it, she says like in the beginning there were lots of giggles. People didn't take her seriously in her country, and others were like there's this funny foreign policy, I don't remember, article about it's called something like Swedish women against Putin or something like that. And everyone was confused, like, what the hell is a feminist foreign policy? So she did so much explaining. But like very soon after, other countries started following. So it was in 2017 that Canada announced their feminist international assistance policy, so feminist development policy. And then in 2019, last year, on International Women's Day, France announced a feminist diplomacy. In Mexico, in January this year, they announced their feminist foreign policy.
That was really heartening to see that, actually.
That was amazing, right?
Yeah,
it's
really
the
amazing.
First country of the global south to announce a feminist foreign policy.
But I like the fact that both of my neighbors to the north and the south have done this, you know?
Right?
Putting on the squeeze.
Yeah, right. And now, because I mean, we have, as my organization, we've just looked like intensively into like the history, because we just submitted a report on European Union Feminist Foreign Policy commissioned by the Green Party in the European Parliament, a report on feminist foreign policy and what EU feminist foreign policy should look like. And in this process, we looked into the history. So like currently there are more countries. There's, for example, like very recently, Luxembourg and Spain and Cyprus and Malaysia, who all of them announced that they're looking thoroughly into either announcing a feminist foreign policy or a gender equal foreign policy. And even the German foreign ministry, in March, on the occasion of International Women's Day, they presented in a whole day conference, the minister himself presented a report on German foreign policy and gender equality. That was the first of its kind. So there's this interesting...
Does Germany have a feminist foreign policy? I don't know. No, not yet.
No. So that was kind of the first very prominent step into Germany does definitely not have a feminist foreign policy, but they've been doing very good work, especially in women, peace and security, for the past 1.5 years and beyond a little bit. So like this report was really interesting to see, and it's very self-critical because the German foreign ministry, like so many other ministries around the world, I mean, they proactively excluded women from the diplomatic service for until the 50s, and in other countries it was even beyond that. And it's impressive steps even in Germany, such a conservative country.
So not to make this too focused on the United States, but because I think I am, that's the passport, that's my home. I'm curious of your perspective on the U.S. in all of this.
So let me mention that research because it might be interesting for listeners as well. The two researchers, Biglio and Fogelstein, at the Council on Foreign Relations in Washington, D.C., they very recently, like a few weeks ago, they published their research on it's called Gender Equality in Foreign Policy. So they've looked at the different initiatives around the world, and I'm pretty sure it was the US who had the very first ambassador role on women, peace and security. It was Hillary Clinton who said the famous words of like women's rights are human rights, and like she, as the Secretary of State, she initiated a couple of very interesting initiatives. And then we all know it went very downhill, and things that on kind of economic empowerment of women, especially led by Ivanka Trump, that is what feminist organizations call like pinkwashing. So there's nothing hopeful in that regard happening at the moment. But there are organizations who are who are pushing and who we're working with. One of them is the International Center for Research on Women that is based in Washington, D.C. as well. And together with ICRW and my organization, but also representatives of those governments that have a feminist foreign policy, we recently published a kind of a golden standard framework on feminist foreign policy. And we presented it during a press conference early March in New York. And this organization, the International Center for Research on Women, they're currently working on a what would you call it, like a proposal or advocacy paper on what a feminist foreign policy for the US should look like. And they want to have it ready once the hopefully new president starts their work. I know. So they are really leading the work on feminist foreign policy in the US.
Thanks for that. One of the things I'm noticing around the world is that every time somebody is bold in their language, I get more bold, and hopefully vice versa. Mm-hmm. And I just loved how you put out right on your website, the foreign policy status quo is rooted in patriarchal values and perpetuates systemic violence through capitalism, imperialism, and colonialism. These systems negatively impact different people in different ways based on their gender, race, ethnicity, class, socioeconomic status, sexuality, and more. I thought when I interviewed a young woman in South Sudan, Ria Uyada, who's an amazing activist, mm-hmm. and I noticed how her language, my language, we're both encouraging each other. We're mm-hmm. different age groups, but it's just encouraging each other to get more clear about calling things what they are. And now I'm also noticing with COVID that it's also making me a little bit to throw caution to the wind and just say, I am calling things as I see it. Mm-hmm. And but I wanted to ask you about you, and because you got some real fire in the belly, I can feel it, as we say. And I wanted to just hear a little bit about your background, like what made you, this is maybe a longer story, but some highlights about what made you a feminist, what gave you a fire in the belly, what has given you voice? Because I think for so many women, finding their voice is such a big challenge.
It is such a big challenge. And it is precisely because of this tiring patriarchal society out there. And and I'm going to probably respond to your question in a second, but just this thought, and again, it's research by the Council on Foreign Relations, but also by a German NGO who's recently looked at civil society around the world. The group that receives most hatred and attacks, it is feminist organizations, and it's women politicians and women activists. Every time a woman, a feminist, speaks up about the status quo and challenges something, there's all this hatred coming your way. So it's just so frustrating. So
well, I think fundamentally it's that we're cheap labor, fundamentally, and men, and of course many men are feminists, but I think in general the system of patriarchy supports a whole system of labor that is unpaid, cheaper, supportive of men in power, and so it would be threatening, start tearing that apart.
Exactly, and it's based on the idea that that women are supposed to stay in the private and men in the public sphere. So whenever we challenge that, and as women, as feminists, make our voices heard, there's all this attempts to silence those voices. And for me, I've had my fair share of hatred and rape threats and threats against my family, because I've been involved in feminist activism for a couple of years now. I wasn't raised as a feminist. I grew up in a tiny village in the south of Germany, in the countryside. 80 people live here, and it's a wonderful working class background family. I had the best childhood here. But here in Bavaria, it's conservative, and the idea of those who work hardest would get the best positions in society. It's really ingrained in society here. So no understanding of biases and structural discrimination, all of these. And it took me until my postgraduate education that I first properly learned about human rights and globalization and structural discrimination and feminism. once I did, it was like my feminist awakening. I started seeing so many things, and I started realizing that many things that made me uncomfortable when I grew up, especially like here as well, like things like the fact that all power positions in my village and around, that means the mayor and the teacher and like the in the tiny school here, and the head of the supermarket, and like all these like power positions in a village, they were all obviously occupied by men, but on top very often by men, like the driving school teacher here and some others who made us young women, girls, very uncomfortable very often at like the annual like sports association party or something. Like they did things and approached us in a way that made us uncomfortable, but then realizing at the same time that they are so respected by others, that really always left me with like a very, very unease feeling. And then later in my early 20s, when I did learn about feminism and patriarchy and the whole history and how society developed and how power has been distributed, I got very, very angry. And I started with, I set up this campaign against Europe's most influential and powerful newspaper that is incredibly sexist and portrays always men as actors and like powerful people, and women only in a sexualized way, objectified way. So I started this campaign, and it received quite some attention by national and international press. And from then on, I was involved in like different feminist activism during my studies.
So
and also,
sorry,
yeah.
You said you got angry, and that sometimes is it's a challenge for people to connect to their anger and then act on it. And it's anger is such an important emotion, a source of change. What do you think allowed you to connect to your anger and then move with it?
I guess the people, to a big part, the people in my life at that time. It was around the time when I was studying in the UK whilst I was doing the activism in Germany. That also gave me some distance, I guess, that was needed at the time. So when I started with all this kind of activist work and this status quo challenging work, I met a woman in the UK. Her name is Dr. Cilla Elworthy.
I interviewed her, yeah.
Oh, of course you did.
Yeah, she's wonderful, really wonderful.
Amazing. So Cilla is a 3 times Nobel Peace Prize nominee and built several organizations focusing on nuclear disarmament and localized peace building and feminism. So Cilla came into my life at this very important point, and like we've been very, very close friends since, and she's been my mentor since. And she has had one of the most profound impacts on my life. So having someone like her who also, like, I will never forget, like back then when I first felt this anger and like many different feelings, like fear and anger, and I was in sadness when all those men attacked me. She said to me, Kristina, anger is like fuel. If you just like spray it around uncontrolled, it can cause a lot of harm. But if you channel it in a way that it can be kind of be the fuel for your motor, it can do amazing things. So yeah.
A couple of things. I'm curious, what your parents think about what you're doing. Just because sometimes, that's always an interesting thing. How you have had, because whether you've had to extract yourself from some of your core conditioning, or whether they have been able to be really supportive of you.
So pretty much at the time when I started getting involved like in feminist activism, it was when my dad passed away, unfortunately. So my and like looking back, I think like this overwhelming, like incredibly overwhelming sadness and grief that I felt, because I'm a daddy's girl. So the sadness that I felt then, it kind of also this like strong feeling was also part of kind of the fuel for me. It, like looking back, like in my head, I'm thinking about like how my dad passed away, and then I went back to London to continue studying, and then to Oxford and stuff, and feeling all those feelings, but still want to do something and like channel those feelings and do something meaningful. That in a way was a like big part of it.
Was he was supportive of you? He was empowering to you?
Regarding the feminist work, I would actually be curious. I think he would be, because there was he would.
I'm guessing he would be. I just looking at you and thinking about it, I'm guessing that he would be, but who knows? Yeah.
But for everything else, yeah, he was like literally one of the last things he learned about me, because I came back home from my studies in London to be here during kind of the past couple of weeks. One of the last things he learned was that I was accepted to Oxford, and whilst he had no idea what Oxford was, he confused it with Harvard. Like he told some of his friends, I was listening to that conversation, yeah, my daughter got accepted to Harvard. I'm like, no.
Yeah, same idea.
Like, same. So, but he was very proud and extremely supportive.
I found it really interesting over the years when I was doing work in Afghanistan with women leaders and in different places, and in my own life, just seeing when fathers are supportive of daughters, what a huge difference I think it often makes in terms of them finding their voice and them being able to step out into the world.
Yeah, exactly. Like whilst he didn't know much, like we never talked. Unfortunately, we never talked about feminism because it was not one of my topics back then. But so I would be really curious. But like he didn't know much about these things. But like every time when I was studying in London, and I was completely overwhelmed with everything. Every time I called him, he was like, "Come on, Tina, don't let them get you down. You can do it. You can do it." And he was just amazing. And he always said, if anyone like annoys you, speak up. Like you find your voice and like you tell them off, and don't let anyone put you down.
There you go. There you go.
There you go.
There you go. There's the message. That's wonderful.
Yeah.
And you were saying, I don't know if you want to say anything about your mom or
my mom. Yeah, she's really cute. She also like, it's like feminism, the idea and like concepts of patriarchy and like all those heavy subjects. It's like nothing that is of huge relevance here in conversations in the village. But my mom, she keeps asking, and only recently, like she was like, "Oh, Kristina, so what exactly are you doing, and how can I translate it into German when I want to explain to someone?" So, and she mainly thinks that I'm doing good things for women's rights, and she's very proud of that, and that's enough. So yeah, she's very proud.
Beautiful. So, I think I'm heavily Gestalt trained. And one of the things in terms of intervening in organizational systems is we're always talking about, having a very compelling vision. If you have a very compelling vision, lots of times the system will move towards it. And it seems like, you're in the process of articulating that. And I wondered if you could, as best you can, as simply as you can, because it's obviously probably a long conversation, articulate where, the vision, what are you moving towards? What's the point in the future? What is it? What's the positive thing that you would like to create here?
So I personally, but also with our organization, we're trying to contribute to a world and a future that is based on a fair distribution of power. And that simply means that all groups of society, like to the extent that they are represented in society, should have access and also the right to influence policymaking, and especially decisions about their own security. And once the variety and the kind of this beautiful variety of like different needs and ideas and lived experiences makes it into policymaking, we are convinced that we managed to create a world where there will not be racism and sexism and misogyny and this like huge gap between the super rich and the very poor. That's kind of the vision.
Yeah. So Riane Eisler has been a guest on my show a couple of times and has, talked about, I don't know if you know her, know her work, but about sort of dividing the world into models of domination and models of partnership. And with the vast majority of human history actually being models of partnership, which Bill Urey also, who's an anthropologist from Harvard, has underscored as well. But I think what Riane talks about, which makes so much sense to me, and I think I said to you in the beginning, is the connection between what's going on in the family and then what happens in the global arena, and the connection to all the isms. I think so often people, particularly where in this country where race is such a deep issue, often there isn't as much of a connection as I would like to see to what's happened around gender. Because I think if you are a kid in a home and you learn from the beginning that there is one parent that is more important than the other, you learn a one up, one down kind of constellation, which is the heart of patriarchy, essentially. It's the heart of patriarchal learning. And then you can apply it to all kinds of things like, okay, well, then people who are light skinned are more important than people who are dark skinned, and people who are, gender queer are not as important as people that are gender normative, and all those kinds of one ups, one downs. Does that make sense to you, what I'm saying?
Very much, very much. And the professor that I mentioned before, Valerie Hudson, so her news book just came out. I haven't read the whole book yet, but like an article she wrote for us, and it's exactly on this. She calls it the first political order, exactly what you just mentioned. Yeah.
I have to say, right now in the middle of COVID, I find myself getting pretty angry about all of this, because Stephanie Savell was also a guest on the show, and she's from the Costs of War Project at Brown University, and they've done some amazing work about tracking, well, mostly U.S. military spending. But when you look at just the U.S. around military spending, and you can look at it globally too, but the U.S., of course, has been the biggest military spender. We've been spending our money on military things that will not affect climate change, will not affect something like COVID, cannot protect us from a pandemic. And yet my country has been so caught up in the PR of all this, that we just go ahead and do it. And at this point, we're spending at least 57 cents of every dollar on military solutions. And it's not doing anything for us except for coming up with more fancy bombers that we're not using, and sometimes fancy video games that is like acculturating little boys and sometimes little girls, but mostly little boys, so that they can be the next round of warriors in this whole militaristic scheme. And I think the more women, I guess I have a thing, women for the global north, particularly sometimes, I'll just speak for my country, I feel sometimes like I want to light a fire under all of us to kind of look at this, because I don't think women, if they're given the purse strings, I don't think they spend money. At least the experts tell me that we don't spend money quite the same way. And so I think the more that women are really in charge of looking at budgets, the more we're going to say, no, actually, we're not going to spend money like that. We're going to spend money on meeting people's needs, which is what we need to do. We're going to spend money in this country on having a public health care system so we can prevent future pandemics and things like that.
Yeah. For me, someone like an outsider looking at the US, I'm just... I'm lacking words, pretty frankly, quite often. I was in terms of what's
happening with the pandemic,
with COVID, but also the lack of like a healthcare system and healthcare insurance. And so I spoke at a conference at Harvard early March, and then from Boston went to New York for another event, but was closely checking on the situation, and already felt really weird about being there in the first place, but then being in New York and realizing that almost no one early March, like 3 weeks ago, was talking about COVID. I did this one Instagram story where I just like took a picture and like people everywhere, and I wrote like this country or this city is like sleepwalking to a catastrophe. Like this complete lack of leadership in this crisis now on a national level. It is absolutely incredible. And I can't get my head around the fact that even if people get like to the hospital and will survive COVID if they had been infected, that many of them will not be able to pay their bills. Like that is someone who grows up in Germany. I can't grasp the fact that a country cannot provide health insurance for their citizens. It's like it's beyond imagination for me. And so regarding COVID and like feminist issues, exactly what you mentioned, right? The whole thing about so much money being spent on militarism, and one of the core issues of feminist foreign policy is disarmament, and organizations like the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom for more than 100 years have now been calling to move the money from military to what keeps people really safe, like to human security. And that is healthcare, education, that is housing, like all those topics.
A good food system.
Yes, everything. And we have, and as an organization, we have this incredible advisory board, and one of our advisory board members, Sanam Andalini, who is the director of the London School of Economics Center for Women, Peace and Security, and also the founder of an organization called International Civil Society Action Network. Sanam published this widely read post last week on what has feminism to do with women, peace and security, and also made it very clear, like she posed the question, like, how can it be, like, she's half American, half Iranian, and she said, like, how can it be that we are awash with weapons, but we do not have enough masks, like, to provide our healthcare workers with? Like, what is this world we're living in? And so my Center for Feminist Foreign Policy, we've been doing quite some communication work around why COVID is like a feminist issue. So we've built this page on our website with all collected lots of resources, and identified like a couple of main themes, like intimate partner violence against women, that is rising hugely, and the unfair distribution of unpaid care work, but also the deep prioritization of sexual and reproductive health rights and more, but also how like what keeps people really safe, and that all this money is now lacking in those human security systems, because money had been spent over decades on militarism. And we are currently the organization in conversations with a ministry in Germany, because we'll be doing some work with them on how to mitigate the gendered impacts of COVID and what can be done about that. And I mean, the knowledge is all out there, and feminists have been saying it for so many years.
And I think
to push it in.
I think, also for women everywhere, bringing it inside, and because obviously we can look outside, but also I think the more that women really, really take their leadership into their hearts. I mean, we're raising kids. We're doing a lot of things. We're not the only ones raising kids now, but there's so many things we can do to shift this equation if we really want to do it. And I think that everything has gotten too dicey with climate change, and it's time. I mean, I love the women in Afghanistan. The women I worked with, they were calling themselves the fierce mothers of Afghanistan, and I feel like that's what I am. I'm a fierce mother of this planet. I'm fierce. I was fierce about my kids, and now I'm feeling fierce. About this whole damn thing. So what is, I guess, just to because we're running out of time now, but what is most exciting to you in terms of what's unfolding, and what are the next steps that can lead this forward, and how can people be most supportive to you to scale this work?
Whilst the state of this world is difficult for many reasons, and we just mentioned a couple of them, there are good things unfolding, and one of them definitely internationally, the rising, the increasing strength of the feminist movement that we can see everywhere, and especially in feminist foreign policy, like all the countries that I mentioned before that have either adopted a feminist foreign policy, that are looking into feminist foreign policy, or that are not doing any of them, but still collaborating with organizations like mine because they find it important. That's only been 5-6 years. Right. And so many countries have gotten involved. So that is really encouraging, because more and more.
I find that really exciting. I mean, just when I said, when I went to your website and I saw the 2014 Sweden, and then saw different countries doing that, I thought, wow, this is very cool. This is very, very cool.
It is. Yeah, it is brilliant. So there is quite some traction, and we as an organization, we're tiny. Like my co-founder, she's in London. I have a co-director in Berlin, and then we have handful of contractors and volunteers, and we're only we're really young, but we receive like comparatively so much interest. And
tiny, but with a very big message and bold voices.
Exactly. Yeah. And like all the ministries and governments that approach us, but also young women who say, it's the first time that I feel like international affairs is also for me. Because how foreign affairs, international politics, diplomacy. I studied diplomacy at Oxford and always thought like Oxford it's like the place. There were so many things lacking still. And I never felt that diplomacy is for me as well. But so we are the world's first organization on feminist foreign policy. And we are standing on so many shoulders of giants. And I can already see that so many others take inspiration from us. So it's like this movement is getting stronger, and we are collaborating like beyond national borders and beyond continents. And it's just really encouraging. Yeah. And so, your last question regarding how people can support us.
Yes.
we have we have a membership program, and we're grateful for everyone joining us as a member.
What does that mean to do that, and how do they do it?
So if you go on our website, that's the Center for Feminist Foreign Policy.org/membership.
Which is, by the way, I really this website is wonderful to spend some time just, touring around in it. There's a lot in there.
Thank you. Thank you. You can become a member, the like different types of membership, and that way you can support us financially, and we share lots of like inside information and a specific newsletter, and they are
beautiful. Well, Kristina, thank you so much for your time. As everybody seems to be saying these days, stay safe, stay strong, stay home.
Yeah, right.
All of that. But I hope this is not the first time we cross paths, and I hope that I can be supportive to you in your work. And we can collaborate, because I'm really just so impressed with what you're doing. And so glad you're putting this on the agenda, because from many years I spent years at Columbia University and around the School of International and Public Affairs, and which, I'm very grateful for many of the things that happened there, and very aware of also how deep some of the patriarchal structures are in a lot of those institutions. And it's time to start, breaking them up, moving things around. And I will say, I just think the world for men, women, for people will be so much more pleasurable for it.
For everyone.
I think that having a son who is just such a beautiful soul, and watching how patriarchal structures have molded him, limited him. He's fighting against them. But boy, it just so limits what men can feel and do and be. Yeah. And so feminism is a very, very luscious thing for all people.
Most definitely. Exactly. Thank you so much, Susan. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks again for joining us. So enjoyed this conversation with Kristina Lunz. Please share this episode and suggest that folks subscribe at susanholman.global. You can also subscribe there to our Women Negotiation and Power blog at the same time for all the latest news and updates. We love your support. Thank you, and stay tuned for more great content as fast as we can create it. Until then, stay strong, stay safe, stay focused on the lemonade we can create from these lemons, and remember one of our mottos, that the best way to predict the future is to create it.